All right, and we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to Hangops. It is October 10th, 2014. It's good to be back in the saddle. Got a few people today, kind of an informal session. Kind of see what people want to talk about, or I can do a recap of Feature Stack, which I just got home from. But first things first, anybody want to introduce themselves? Jake? No?
I mean, I'll introduce myself. I'm Ernest Irvin. I do operations with Kissmetrics, and I also work with the Python Software Foundation, primarily PyPI.
Cool, awesome. Anybody else want to say hello?
Hey guys, I just joined. I don't know what's up, but I'm Steve.
Just kind of informal, just kind of seeing who's here.
Cool.
Cool. You were involved with DevOps Days Toronto, right?
That's right, yeah. I just came back from DevOps Days Chicago, actually, too. I just had my first Ignite talk, which was amazingly stressful, but super fun. Yeah.
Cool. You want to give us a recap of Chicago?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so we had Bridget Cromhout, who was there first day. She gave keynotes on how much is that DevOps in the window. Basically, just talking about how people sort of abuse the term and how it's kind of a gray area that people are kind of scared of. We had one of my favorites was Paul Reed doing DevOps equals 42, which actually originated from a joke that he and Matt Stratton were talking about some drunken night at some conference. I think it was AgileConf. They said, you know, we should definitely have a talk about this, and eventually the next day they had no idea what the point of the joke was, but based on the dare, I guess, Paul went through with it, and he gave a really good talk about how sort of 42 being the reference from the Douglas Adams books, where nobody knows the question.
No, I think that's actually correct. Sure. It doesn't really matter anyway, it's just an email address. Oh, yeah, but it's pretty valid, right? I don't think it matters as far as, like, loading the zone with a long shot channel.
Okay. He's like muting and unmuting. Weird. Okay. Right. The answer to life, the universe, and everything. Right.
Yeah. So that was, and actually all those talks are now up. I'll post the URL. We got some guys called Next Day Video to film it all. And it's all on YouTube.
Cool. So what was your Ignite talk about?
So my talk was it was called Lay It to Smack It Down. And it was about basically a simple process for like getting started, or if you haven't got any traction with what you tried to implement DevOps in your company, like really simple steps. So where SMAC is like the opposite of CAMS, but I tweaked it a little bit. So it stands for sharing, measurement, automation, and control instead of culture. Because one of the main aspects of my talk was that culture is really too difficult to sort of tackle head on, and I think it's a lot easier to sort of address culture as the result of like going through rituals and sort of making progress within DevOps as an initiative, within DevOps as a sort of conversation term in your company, rather than trying to say we're going to do the culture thing, or we're going to like sprinkle some DevOps in the organization and get get this like, or you know, DevOps has the magic beans where culture is the beanstalk, right? Because we all know it doesn't really happen that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, like talking about some of the culture stuff, especially because uh, I think a lot of what goes into changing culture is actually about what is incentivizing people inside your organization, right? Like what is like I think in a lot of engineering organizations, success is considered shipping without a lot of like what are we shipping? It's much more about did we ship than like what did we ship and how is that defined? And so changing that, right? Changing how people are measuring themselves and how management is measuring them and how the business is measuring itself is a big challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of companies, you know, they try to implement DevOps without actually measuring as much as they should. And they start from this foundation where they don't know where they're coming from. They don't know where they currently are, and they don't really know what they expect to get out of it. And if it's not hypothesis driven, if it's not sort of following a scientific method or following a method at all, then you really don't know if you've achieved anything or if you have to work in a specific direction. You know, you sort of tackle DevOps as this random thing. I don't think will work for many people at all. I like
So
the Jordan show.
what's that?
I like the Jordan shows. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah. So
uh,
this talk you're giving is coming from the point of view of like lessons that you've learned trying to enact like a positive change through DevOps style stuff in your organization, or from success or failure or both? Like what was like was sort of the funnel that brought you to the talk?
it's kind of a combination of like my personal experience with a couple companies. I've been working as a consultant for a little bit, so I get to see sort of inside a bunch of different companies at the same time. And then prior to that, you know, trying to even affect technical change in organizations before DevOps was even a thing. You know, driving technical change is kind of this task we've all had to deal with way before we had this DevOps thing to talk about and put it in that context. We all have to be doing that all the time, and so it's sort of framing it now within the context of DevOps, but it's all the same stuff about how to sort of talk to people and convince them that, you know, they should be doing something or trying something out, and you know, you definitely have to approach that from a place of sharing and measurement and control for sure.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned cams a minute ago. We've got the father of cams with us now, John Willis.
John, I gave you a shout out at my night talk yesterday.
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, no, totally cool. Yeah, no, Damon too, right? So me and Damon,
Yeah.
I always joke that was a podcast after the first Silicon Valley where we were just so blown away about 300 people showing up for an event. And that's the only way we could describe it was cams.
So to expand on what we're talking about a little bit, I'd love to put this question to you, John. Like, you know, because right in CAMS, right, you've got C, culture, and M, measure. But I think measure is traditionally applied around like measuring metrics, right? Like, what can I put into graphite? What can I put into Ganglia or New Relic or whatever? Like, measuring computers. But what about measuring people, right? We talked a minute ago about like how like a lot of engineering culture is hard to change because they value shipping, but maybe they aren't really measuring or quantifying what they're shipping. You know, success is vague and it's not well defined, and so then it's hard to say like, are we changing the culture? Are we improving?
No, Great question, Brendan, and thank you for inviting me too. So it's funny when we did the cams one. Honestly, the M was a punt, right? We didn't know shit we were talking about. I mean, honestly, like culture was all over the map coming out of that Silicon Valley event, right? Like, I don't know if you guys know, like some of the planning for that, we were trying to predict with 300 people, would people still be interested in talking about this kind of crap after 3 days of velocity? Right, that was the fear, that if we ran it the 2 days after velocity, would people be like, oh, come on, I've had enough. And I remember sitting there on the second day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's still 280 people in the room, and they're as excited as they were, as anybody was the first day of velocity, right? This is 2010. And so me and Damon did a podcast the next week, and we were like, we didn't even invite a guest. Like, we were like, holy crap, what just happened there? Because it was only like 40 people in Ghent, 50, maybe 60 people in Ghent, right? And so when we started like coming down, okay, it's clearly culture. There's a podcast where we're like mangling this acronym, and the automation was clear, like Chef, Puppet. I was still at, or I was just about to join Chef, and the measurement was like, yeah, of course, monitoring. And to make a long story short, over time, as I've like studied deeper now about lean and dare I say it, I always have to, Deming. The M is really more about what Gene calls the feedback loops, his first way and second way. And the second way is the feedback loop. So I think the answer is the gangula and all that stuff's great, but to get this right, the M really implies to me now, and it didn't back then, in all honesty, feedback loops. And so feedback loops include monitoring, but it includes a whole lot more, right? Where it's the metaphorical andon chord. It's the how do we move and learn things quicker, and so again, to me, more of that M. I think the high level answer to your question is, we think about it more about the assembly line and how do we not just measure data but create reactive or resilient feedback loops from what we're doing. Does that make sense?
It does, and actually, some of that stuff touches on. So, it's a Future Stack the last couple of days, right? New Relic's big user data conference.
Not bad.
When you say user conference, it's a lot about data and stuff. And one of the talks that they liked was a friend of mine, JD Maturin, who's at GitHub these days, and it was called "Towards Data-Driven Product: Techniques and Tools at GitHub." But it was really about like the math, like he's into like the OODA loop and Bernoulli and a lot of stuff, and like Thinking Fast and Slow, right? That book, and so it was really relevant. I'll link to his slides, but so there was a lot of interesting stuff in there, kind of touching on that about how like think about like data and then how to use it.
Well, there's the S, right? Like the sharing was another kind of punt for us. I mean, it's like we're all learning, right? We're like in this aggregate, we're all like all boats are rising from the rising tide, right? Like we're all getting smarter from just listening to everybody talk about this. I mean, our conversation about monitoring, I think 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I think our discussions about monitoring now as an echo chamber. We're still an echo chamber, but it's much broader, makes much more sense, and I think we're having more impact on what we all do as a daily job. I'm in a good mood today, you can tell.
So I've been. I imagine maybe something to do with the event that you're working on. I've been seeing you tweet about. You want to maybe share a little bit about that with
Thank
us?
you, sir. Yeah. So some of you know that over the last year, I've I was fortunate enough to have an exit within Stratius to Dell, and then so I had some time to kind of think about what I wanted to do next, and I ran into some network guys that were working heavily in SDN, and I just saw, wow, and as I talked to more network people, it was like eerie, how as if we put the conversation back 7 or 8 years ago. I mean, everybody I talked to network space, it would be like the conversations when I first talked to people. Luke convinced me I was wrong about everything when I first met Luke, right? I had been doing Tivoli stuff, and I run into this, I'll say it, pimply kid at the time, trying to talk about something I thought I was an expert on, and when I finally got it, I was like, holy crap, everything I've been doing for the last 10 years is like 2006, 2007 has been dead wrong, right? And then we all kind of spent the last let's say 8 years, maybe decade to round up, trying to convince the mindset of IT professionals, but we've been doing it in compute. And so when I started thinking about what we've done over the last 8 years, and I started thinking about what about the network folk, right? And it was like, again, it was like I went back 7 or 8 years ago to every one of them, and they're like, I can't do that. The arguments against were like so, I mean, literally, replace the word server with switch, and it was the same argument, right? And so over the last year, some of you know, I've spent a lot of time in things like SDN, NSX, and all that stuff. And at the DevOps Days in Silicon Valley this summer, some of the guys from Cisco, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, but the Cisco said, hey, we don't want to do this ourselves, right, because we don't want this to be a Cisco event. But can you help us get started with an event where the focus is from a network trying to reach out to DevOps, not a DevOps reaching out to network? And so that was the genesis of it. I ran into Dave Nielsen, who is the Cloud Camp Big Data King, and he was kind of ready to set it up really quick, and we put it. It's next Tuesday, October 14th, in the same place, the Computer History Museum, same place we ran the DevOps Silicon Valley. It's a free. We're going basically the same model of DevOps Days, until we get some traction. The only reason we charge at DevOps Days, right, is because too many people would register and not come, right? So I'm certain that's going to happen here. We just hit 300 on our registration. It's a one-day event, half-day speakers. Second half of the day is going to be open spaces. So if you're in California, and if you're in the Valley, anywhere, again, it's Mountain View. It's going to be an awesome event. And I want DevOps. I don't want it to be too lopsided on network folk. I mean, I want a good amount of network folk to come. People, sorry. But it would be awesome, like if you were in the neighborhood, Brandon, that'd be awesome to have a guy like you there, and people to come in and like watch this fusion. Right, because we're not getting enough of that, and they need our help. That was the one thing I found out real early on when I started going around asking some of the leading edge network people that really wanted to make this happen. They were like, dude, you know how this story ends. Please come in and help us like figure out this story. So the network people want us, and they want our experience. And I'm hoping this event is a seminal event in terms of really getting starting that conversation of what happened 8-10 years ago in compute, just to hopefully it doesn't take as long, but to make that happen. So next Tuesday, it's in Mountain View, California. It's a free event. It's DevOps #4 networks.com. So DevOps and the #4 networks.com, all one word. We just hit 300. I think we're going to sell out here, but I mean, with a free event, if we got 300, that means 150 are coming. So I think we'll clearly take another 50 seats. If people want to come, it'd be awesome to have more. I definitely want some Ninja DevOps folks in the audience, because the open spaces will be awesome. Oh, just a couple more things. Sorry, J.R. Rivers from Cumulus is doing a keynote. I don't know if you guys know the Cumulus story. It's an amazing disruptive story in the network fabric. These guys that have basically disaggregated the hardware from the software. They sell you a network operating system, no hardware. In Google style, Amazon style. Laurie McVitie over at F5, Brent Salisbury, who recently left Red Hat but's been working on Open Daylight, Colin McNamara, and we have a panel session is, should network people have to learn how to code or not? So that's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, I see some smiles. I'll shut up now.
So, Jordan, do you think you can make it? You're in the area. You report back to us next week.
I need a pro. I need a really staunch. I don't think I can get Adam, but I want somebody who has 15 sessions open at any given time, types above 120 words a second or minute, whatever, and thinks that you have to be a coder to do anything, because there's going to be a mixed panel, and it would be awesome. I got a definite spot for somebody who has a firm belief that everybody in history has to know how to code, whether it's network or sysops or operations. Yeah, I got a slot for anybody who wants to sit on that panel and play that side of the argument.
I don't know if I could be that staunch of a devil's advocate in that area.
I know Adam would be pretty nasty, but yeah, I mean, come on back. Yeah, I mean, it'd be awesome to have you come, buddy. And by the way, long time no see. How you doing?
Surviving.
Surviving. Yeah.
Parenting is insane.
Oh, geez, yeah. How old? I'm sorry.
Almost turning 3, and then the other one's almost turning 1.
Oh, wow. Crazy stuff.
Craziness. I have nothing else really to contribute. I'm just lurking.
Now
I
I
painted
am.
my office. It's now a dark, nice color instead of a white. If that matters to you, I'm happy.
Cool. Brandon, take the mic.
Yeah. So
Or else.
Well, yeah.
take the wheel. Ah!
I let go, man. Drop it and run.
It's like they say. I want to die soundly in my sleep, or no, I want to die peacefully in my sleep like my grandfather, not screaming and wailing like the other people in his car.
That's fun.
Okay, so future stack, right? Well, I'll do a little recap of that. So this was pretty cool. A little background on kind of on why I went, because it's definitely not my sort of usual scene. I guess it was only just last year. Andrew Clay Schaefer and Dominica. Is it? I can't remember how to pronounce her last name. She has all the Kanban stuff. Dondris? You know what I'm talking about, John? Dominica?
DeGeneres, yeah.
Yeah. They and I think some other people know, but basically they added a DevOps track to the big Agile Alliance conference. And Andrew hit me up. He's like, "You gotta submit a talk." So I submitted a talk. I had a talk there, and it was a interesting experience because the first time I'd really gone to a conference that was outside of like DevOps and systems administration. Very different crowd. And like on reflection, I actually realized like, you know what, that's actually really cool to get a little more variety. And so I was looking for a fall conference, and New Relic's got this Future Stack second year doing this kind of a user conference slash like data science and monitoring and metrics and stuff conference. And since San Francisco, so I figured I'd go and give it a shot. It was definitely like a mix of there's like some producty stuff and computing, there's some panels like what's next in cloud. They had one of the guys from Google, I forget his exact position, but his team, they're like a lot of the guys working on like Kubernetes and that kind of stuff, containerization, and then I think it was the CTO from Rackspace, kind of talking about like what's next in cloud, what's the next year. There's also some real good talks. Daniel Schaunberg, Mr. Taz on Twitter from Etsy, did a great talk on how they do data-driven monitoring at Etsy. Turin's talk, right, on data-driven product design at GitHub. Mitchell Hashimoto, right, HashiCorp, did a talk that was kind of introduction to Terraform and sort of the ideas of like automating the data center in the cloud. And kind of like it was like a here's the first principles, and then here's how we implemented them with Terraform of like really doing a fully automated data center. So some interesting stuff there, and they had some like sort of customer stuff coming in. They had a couple really interesting presentations from New Relic customers. One of which was a code.org, which is a site that's basically trying to anyone can learn how to code. It's really interesting, and they actually, so the CEO of New Relic was up there talking about it, and it was his friend's daughter actually came up on stage and was talking about how she learned JavaScript through code.org. And so it was like the CEO's family and his friend's family were at Tahoe in their cabin, and like one day for Christmas last year, I forget exactly the sequence of events, basically like the oldest daughter of their friends had been learning some JavaScript on code.org and Khan Academy, and then was like showing one of their girls, and all of a sudden they were like 4 girls in the cabin and only 3 laptops, and they're all fighting over wanting to do these little coding exercises on code.org and Khan Academy and write like little games and stuff. And it started because the oldest daughter was learning JavaScript, and like she made her dad a Christmas card, like animated sprite page, and she's actually starting like a. It was kind of cool to like it's kind of like future of coding, and also they were touching a little bit of biology. So there was like a big social aspect, city stuff, and it was a lot of fun. It was kind of
Hey,
cool too. The
Brandon.
way they broke it down as like two
Hey,
tracks.
Brandon.
Yeah. What's up?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out. You can't invite me without me being a big mouth, right? But this one's cool. There was a gal, a senior, high school senior at Velocity, New York, who did an Ignite talk. I can put the link in the chat or whatever. I mean, this woman was a senior in high school. You know how hard it is to do a night talk. She was in front of that big the Velocity crowd is night, and it just, I mean, her name was Puju Chanda Rashka, and she just did this showing girls how to break the tech gender stereotypes. And I'm telling you guys, I have a 15-year-old son in high school, and I went up to her and I said, "Holy crap! I just can't imagine how awesome you were compared to what I know is the standard." So I'll put the link in. Anyway, it was just a nice segue. But you guys really, if you hadn't seen it, it's just absolutely amazing. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, that kind of stuff is cool. And so like I looked it up on Twitter. It's Code Girl Club is her name's Alana, and there's a couple shots, like she retweeted a couple shots of her up on stage and stuff. It was pretty cool. It was just it was like it was kind of a cool thing to sort of mix in there with the like more technical talks. And the format's kind of cool because what they do is it's a 2-day conference, and they have 2 tracks. And they have one track that's all the talks, the technology track. The track they call the New Relic track. So there are 2 buildings, and one building is basically like the lounge, lounge and food, and the technology presentations. And then the other one, it's almost kind of more like a vendor hall. So they had booths set up for each of the New Relic products and for the sponsors. And then they did a mix of like product talks and hallway talks, like Ignite talks, in the other one. So it's sort of like you could, they segmented off some of the more product-y focused stuff because it is meant to be a user conference, but then also like had more of a, it's a technology sort of data and metrics and coding and a technology track. So it was a nice, split and Ben balancing kind of the 2 reasons you'd come. And yeah, that's kind of what it was. It was really a lot of fun. Got to meet a lot of good people. I got to hang out with Casey Backing, who's on the Hangout, Hayden, another LA DevOps person, and it was a great crowd. Really good conference, and I probably will be back next year.
Did they have any big reveals this year? Because I remember when I went to the first Future Stack, and their big thing was insights. So the whole like sort of big data aggregation and querying of all of your New Relic data. And that was kind of cool. Like the story behind that of like Lou Cerny going into off to his ranch and sitting by himself and supposedly coding this thing all by himself. That was a lot of fun.
The big things like they talked about were they acquired Duxboard,
right?
Like a hosted like dashboarding tool that supports a lot of things. So that's something they're bringing into the fold. They had the Duxboard guys there to talk.
Everyone super appreciate it because New Relic dashboards as they are just so difficult to deal with.
They are, especially when you compare them with like Grafana. Like the other, like an alternative. They're enhancing the APM stuff. They're building a little plugin installer for the server monitor, the agent plugins. So they're shifting to like having supported runtimes and a little binary installer. They have the insights. They're like continuing to add insights. Insights is kind of interesting. It's kind of this like you put JSON data in, and it gives you this. There's a query language and the ability to build all kinds of really custom, fancy dashboards and really like manipulate the data, display in different ways. And so there was a bunch of new stuff coming for that. There's a thing that I think is coming into beta soon called how is it called? I forget what they're calling it, basically, but it's like an app platform. You can sort of like, I think it's like even more abstract than Insights. You can build almost like custom web apps around like all the data you're putting into Graph or into New Relic, right? Because like, I'm gonna echo somebody. It's you, Steve. I'm gonna meet you. Okay. So right, you've got server monitoring, which is like server metrics, and then you've got like your application performance monitoring, right, which is like you install the agent, and then you're what do you call it? What's the word? Instrumenting your code, and that's reporting a bunch of stuff back. And then you got plugins for things like MySQL, Tomcat, all kinds. There's all these plugins that then get like app-specific data or service-specific data. And then you got this thing, Insights, now, where you basically can put custom metrics, just JSON formatted stuff into it. And it's kind of I think of the data apps. The point of that is to be able to use all that data and like the dashboards you can build with Insights are. And the other cool thing they added is this new thing. It's called synthetics. I didn't realize, but I guess Patrick Lightbody, who originally founded BrowserMob, joined them. And basically, synthetics to me looks like BrowserMob 2.0. So it's hosted browser-driven monitoring with a JavaScript language for defining what to me really look like very similar to Selenium tests. So it's that sort of like user testing, acceptance testing, hosted. Really interesting. I was an early user of BrowserMob, which if you never saw that, it was basically it was Linux boxes on EC2 instances running Firefox and Selenium, but it was meant to be a monitoring product using Selenium. So you would write Selenium tests and then generate the Selenium JavaScript and upload that, and you could run it on schedules and it would record pictures, and they had an API, so you could integrate it. I was working for a hosting company, and we had a customer that had a very important, basically it was like a form that was like all their leads generation. And they had a problem where someone had changed the JavaScript for the submit, something in the JavaScript for the form had broken the submit button. So it looked like the form was submitting, but the data wasn't going anywhere. And they didn't notice till the end of the month when they did like their roll-ups, and like the incoming leads fell off. So with a combination of like a custom Python service and MySQL and a cron script to check a mailbox and BrowserMob, we would basically like simulate someone generating a lead every hour and do end-to-end testing, including receiving the email that the user would get. They basically put a little Easter egg in there. If we did a certain like first name, last name, instead of like sending the normal like thank you for your submission, it would dump like an XML file to the email address that we gave them, and then we would grab that and parse that, and we would record the stuff, and then basically like emit events into a monitoring system. So it was really interesting. Like I've been waiting for like that stuff to really mature to where it's like monitoring is full browser testing. I know Catchpoint has some stuff around that we're actually looking at Lookout, and we were playing with even when I was at Mozilla, of like it's browser-driven automation testing instead of just like curl 200 or curl a JSON file type stuff. So that one will be really cool. And it's no surprise to me after seeing that Patrick Lightbody was there that they built something like that. The other thing they expanded their like mobile crash reporting. So they have like a mobile framework that you can instrument for metrics. They're now adding crash reporting. That's all I can think of. I mean, they're really like pushing their product suite around like metric and monitor everything. And I think some places they're catching up. Like right now, server metrics don't go into Insights. That's one thing I was talking with them a little about. You can like wire it up to pull the JSON down from the servers and put it up in Insights, but they're working on trying to integrate those. And so I think that's kind of the like they're going to new areas and then working on being more cohesive across the board with their data. But it's an evolution. So
I think it's really cool to see them go into like front end testing. That's definitely like an area that's when that comes to mind, there's not many people playing in that space right now, and it's definitely something that we would be really happy to just bolt on to New Relic for sure, and just add Yeah, absolutely. Monitor these following URLs or this user path, especially if they can make it interactive. Like that could really bring New Relic to new parts of the company where you have more QA rather than ops staff actually jumping in it, and even developers. Because that happens in a lot of startups, but I think in larger companies, not everybody's using New Relic. Um, Definitely not the areas that could be. And I think that might be a new, like, more compelling way to bring those people into New Relic rather than saying, why should we give you access to all this, server and metric information? If there's something that's directly relevant to their jobs, uh, and then they get that ops perspective as a byproduct, that's kind of like a Trojan horse that's kind of nice for increasing visibility.
Yeah. So what else is going on?
Well, what else is coming up? So I don't know if anyone else is going to the DevOps Enterprise Summit on the 21st,
I might be there.
but that's something I'm planning to go to, I think. Depends if we can make it work with going to visit some clients, but yeah, that seems pretty interesting. I've never actually seen Mr. Kim talk, and I think it'd be cool to see his first iteration at running a conference.
Yeah, so I'm one of the core organizers of that event with Gene, and I mean it's Gene's show, but I've been on it was what's amusing about that conference that people don't know is we got almost 200 submissions when we did the call for papers, and about about 100 of them were vendors like IBM, we're DevOps, and no disrespect to anybody who's IBM or HP, we're DevOps, and come see our DevOps, but about 100 of them were just pure enterprise good stories. We narrowed it down to 52. I mean, Gene's awesome if you hadn't seen him speak, and it'd be a great opportunity to see him speak. But like, if you're going to see some awesome enterprises, and they're going to show. And we all know there's no such thing as done, right? It's a journey, and so like, but this foolishness about the enterprise can't do DevOps, or the enterprise is different, and therefore they got to cut corners on culture. It's all a bunch of bullshit. And I think from when people see the video, if you get to attend, or we're going to make the videos publicly available, that like anytime somebody says that or tries to use that argument that you can't really do DevOps in the enterprise, I'm not saying it's easy, but like when you start seeing Disney, Barclays, PNC, Target, Gap, Macy's, all get up there and talk about how they're doing like all different parts of this, and we had like there was Dominica, Damon, myself, Jez Humble, Adrian Krakoff, and Gene were all on the selection committee, and these are good stories, man. They're not bullshit stories. I mean, you're going to see. Again, I think most people are going to be blown away about how much adoption is going on, and in the right way in the enterprise. So yeah, dude, if you show up, Steve, let's get some coffee and hang out, man.
Definitely, yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think it's the one area of DevOps that I find most of my enthusiasm for, because I think the idea that DevOps isn't for enterprise is absolutely crazy. I think it's for enterprise more than anyone else, because when you're a startup, when you're a small company, you're already sitting in the same room. You're already working on the same project. A lot of those things that is really hard for enterprise to do, you do by default. So DevOps is kind of baked into the idea of a startup, but enterprise has to actually work for it. They have to actually do the hard work to break down silos, because those just don't exist in a startup. You've got all your tools, everyone can see everything, everyone has access to prod. you're not solving any real hard problems with DevOps in a startup, but in an enterprise, in a big company, that's where you need it. That's where you need to look at that holistic view and do your value stream pipeline exercise where you're saying, here's where we have massive bottlenecks. Here's where we have these huge disconnects between people, and these guys don't know what these people are doing. These guys hate these guys. These people never have a conversation. And that's really where the value is, I think. And it's going to have the most impact. Like, you see huge numbers from enterprise, and startups don't really have stories where it's like, we've increased productivity 60%, our time to market is down 80%. But we're going to see that from enterprises, and more so as that adoption increases. And honestly, those guys are the guys who are super hungry for it. Like, DevOps Days Chicago was huge attendance by enterprise customers, and those guys are just, they're all participating in sessions. They don't really know what to do yet. It's not really clear, but there's so much enthusiasm there. And so that's where I spend a lot of my energy, is just trying to sort of make it as easy and simple as possible to just, get the wheels turning, because the benefits of enterprise are so huge.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's where the big change happens, right? Did Brendan, have you guys talked about the DevOps survey? I mean, it's probably the Puppet Labs survey at all on the show?
I'm not sure if we've
covered
it. I haven't.
I mean, to Steve's point, like, there's some really, I mean, it's an echo chamber, right? Like, I mean, you got to go to Puppet Labs. It's the second year. First year was 4,000 people, but this year's 10,000. So it's a bigger, it's a little broader. I mean, you still had to go into, kind of a Puppet URL to do it, but the data now is just a lot more richer, right? The first year, I mean, in all respect to Gene and Jez, I mean, I didn't get real excited about the first year, right? But this year I got a little excited, and I think the data's starting to show some trends, and I mean, this is a small slice, but something you just said, Steve. I mean, so one of the things they did is they had an opt-in, and so some of the publicly traded companies that opt in, they were actually able to show some, again, it's loose correlation between the stock price, the growth, the market cap, and the way they responded to the survey. Again, it's really just scratching, the smallest part of the body, and I mean, but the point is, and then they have Nicole Vasquez, who's like a PhD professor at University of Utah, and they're really crunching the data. So it's in fact, you'll see a lot of this in Gene's presentation at the DevOps Enterprise, but he's been presenting that. He presented it at PuppetConf, and but anyway, it's good stuff. I mean, it's especially good stuff for you, Steve, and your organization to use as ammo. When people ask, well, yeah, but I think you can start at least showing some data. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I think we've got to be. We can't just throw numbers around, but even those loose numbers will give us indications of where to look, like where to keep digging, right? Where to spend time trying to pull out some meaningful data. And so that's really cool that you can actually see some correlation, right?
Yeah, it's good stuff.
What if like one of the best metrics for how much DevOps you have would be like how inversely as to how many HR complaints you have with fights internally?
Yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of correlations you could have. Wacky combinations like that. Like, how many meetings do we have where it's like entirely one silo, or how many meetings are actually multiple groups, or groups that are eventually involved in a project, who are involved from the beginning versus the end. That's really interesting too.
I remember back in my Tivoli days where we'd go around and we'd do these, we'd go to these large corporations, and you have like 2 weeks to get something done, and literally the first 3 days would just be meetings with like 20 people. And at one point I asked, it was some big company, and I'm like, does this always go on here where they just Like it's like, you know, it would look like there was no end in sight. I mean, they were already scheduling out work for like the Thursday and Friday of the second week. I'm like, guys, it's going to take us 2 weeks to get this done. Like, and you know, and I asked the guy, I said, you know, do you guys like is this like common that you just constantly? And I knew the answer because I'd been in like, you know, 50 or 60 large enterprises over the last 5 years, but this one was the worst, right? And he said, John, it's not only do we have meetings all the time, we don't even keep track of metrics of how often we meet. I'm like, oh my God, you know, like they're not even like not only are they having meetings 70% of the time, nobody was even tracking the fact that they were doing that. Like, so God bless the enterprise.
And that's what I think is really, you know, that's really what I derive from the M and DAMs is sort of not just monitoring, not just metrics, but you know, looking at everything you do, measuring everything you do,
Totally.
Quantifying all that, like how much your meetings cost, you know, calculating the salaries of the people that you're putting in a room, just so that they can sort of check Twitter on their phones.
Right.
It's, that one's easy. That one's easy to do, right? There's an online tool where you can do that.
It's funny.
It's like waste calculation as a service.
That's right.
So I won't be at DevOps Days Enterprise, but I will be in San Francisco the 22nd to the 24th to get some quality time at the Lookout office. So I'd be happy to meet up with people if anyone wants to come by the office and hang out. Just hit me up on Twitter.
No, I'll be in San Francisco at the same time, probably about the 21st or the 24th. If anybody wants to get coffee or local hangouts.
That's right. Jake and I are finally going to meet. Epic hugs.
Cool.
Cool. All right. Well, that seems like a good place to wrap it up. If anyone wants to give a shout out to anything, you know, Hangops is all of you, so it is your platform to promote whatever you want. So please. No. Did DevOps Days Toronto happen, or is that still happening?
Yeah, no, it did.
It did.
We posted videos. I can probably link to those in the comments too. It was awesome. Yeah, I don't think I actually did one. So I've been bouncing around. I went to Velocity almost immediately afterwards, and then we had DevOps Day Chicago. So I've been agonizing over my presentation, but
Oh, that's
Toronto was
right.
awesome. It sold out 3 times. And
Yeah, I wanted to make that, but I had to, it was like I had to be in Portland and then Velocity, and it was like physics just demanded that there's no way I could go to Toronto.
that's cool. We're gonna do it. So immediately after, we were like, we got to do this again.
Yeah, that's right. It was just
So
crazy.
we started planning for the spring. We're going to do probably May or June, so that we're outside the big conference season because it's just too tough to sort of juggle everything, right? So that way we'll get, you know, all the speakers who wanted to speak, all the attendees that wanted to attend, and we'll try and do a better job of getting a date that works for more people. So stay tuned for news on that, but I'll link to the videos. And yeah, it was a huge success. It was tons of fun.
Cool.
All right. Well, we will wrap it up there, and see you all next week.
Thanks, Brandon, for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brandon.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Adios.